You know the name, you know the star, Mercedes-Benz. It just screams luxury, right? But the story behind that emblem? Wow. It's so much more complex and fascinating than just fancy cars. Let's get into it. I mean, just look at this number, $80 billion. That's what the brand is valued at today. It's just mind-boggling. And yeah, you see a sleek Mercedes drive by, and you just think, of course, they were always going to be on top. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The real story? It's a total roller coaster. It's about a guy with a dream everyone thought was crazy, a wife who basically saved the whole company with one gutsy move, some serious corporate throwdowns, and then a really, really dark chapter that changes how you see everything. So where do we even begin? Well, it all starts with one guy, Carl Benz, and an idea that, at the time, sounded completely bonkers. He wanted to build a horseless carriage. Now, Carl Benz didn't come from money. Not at all. He was born into poverty in Germany, and his dad, a train driver, died when he was just a toddler. Times were tough. But his mom, she saw something special in him. She sacrificed everything to make sure he got an education. And boy, did it pay off. He was a natural at mechanics and chemistry, and he got this one idea stuck in his head that he just couldn't shake. And you have to understand, people literally laughed at him. The idea of a motorized car, it was pure science fiction. But Benz, he didn't care. He was a cyclist, and he was just obsessed with the idea of making a machine that could move on its own power. He knew it was possible. He just had to prove it to everyone else. And in 1885, boom, he did it. This is the Benz patent motor wagon. And here's the genius part. He didn't just bolt an engine onto some wagon. No, no. He designed the entire vehicle from the ground up around the engine. It was a three-wheeler, had a tiny little motor, and could go a blistering 7 miles an hour. But this wasn't just a gimmick. This was it, the world's first real automobile. So, did the world go crazy for it? Not exactly. A few people were wowed, sure, but most were, well, they were scared. They thought this thing would just blow up. Even his own business partners were like, "Carl, what are you doing? It's slower than a horse, and it's always breaking down." And that's the thing, right? A brilliant invention means nothing if you can't convince people to believe in it. This is my favorite part of the story. Enter Bertha Benz, Carl's wife. She knew her husband's invention needed a PR stunt, and she delivered. One morning, without telling Carl, she grabs their two sons, hops in the motor wagon, and decides to drive 66 miles to see her mom. 66 miles. Nobody had ever done anything like that. She had to buy fuel from a pharmacy, and she even used her garter to fix the ignition. I mean, she was a total pioneer. It took over 12 hours, but she did it. And just like that, the news went wild. Bertha Benz proved this thing actually worked. The automobile was for real. Okay, so after Bertha's incredible road trip, everything changed. Public interest exploded, and pretty soon, Benz was the biggest car maker in the world. But you know what happens when you're on top, right? Everyone wants a piece of the action. And that leads us right into the next phase of our story. Fierce competition, high-stakes racing, and a merger that nobody saw coming. So Benz's main competition was his company called DMG, run by two guys, Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach. And they could not have been more different. Think of it like this. Benz was the careful, methodical engineer. He was all about making sure the car was perfectly built and absolutely reliable. Daimler and Maybach, they were all about the flash. They knew that to sell cars, you needed power, you needed style, and you absolutely needed to win races. And here's a crazy bit of trivia for you. The name Mercedes, it didn't come from the founders. It came from a customer. This rich businessman, Emil Jelinek, he ordered a race car from Daimler, but had one condition. They had to name it after his daughter, Mercedes. Well, that car just destroyed the competition. We're talking speeds over 50 miles an hour, which was insane back then. It was so successful that Daimler just went, yep, okay, from now on, all our cars are called Mercedes. So for years, it was Benz versus Daimler, a bitter rivalry. But then, World War I happened, and Germany's economy was just obliterated. It was a total disaster. Suddenly, it wasn't about winning races anymore. It was about survival. So these two arch rivals, they had to do the unthinkable. They joined forces. First, they agreed to work together, and then, in 1926, they officially merged, and the powerhouse company Daimler-Benz was born. This new super company, Daimler-Benz, was set to take over the world. But this is where the story, it takes a very dark turn. The company's incredible success became tied up with one of the most horrific periods in human history. When the Nazis rose to power in Germany, they saw Daimler-Benz as the perfect symbol of German engineering and might. The regime poured money into the company to build race cars that would dominate on the world stage, all for propaganda. Their luxury cars, like the Mercedes-Benz 770, became the official rides for top Nazi officials, including Hitler himself. And once World War II started, the company's factories switched completely over to making engines for tanks, planes, and other military hardware. And the human cost of that production was just horrifying. To meet the demands of the war, the company started using forced labor. We're talking prisoners of war, civilians kidnapped from their homes, even people from concentration camps. They were forced to work in the factories in the most brutal, inhumane conditions imaginable. By 1944, just think about this, almost half of the company's entire workforce, nearly half of its 63,000 people, were enslaved laborers. When the war ended, Daimler-Benz was completely destroyed. Its factories were rubble, its assets were gone. It was over. Or so it seemed. The comeback was nothing short of unbelievable. They started making cars again in 1946, they were making a profit by 1948, and by 1954, less than a decade after being totally wiped out, their profits were over $1 billion. It was a staggering resurrection, using the very same industrial know-how they had perfected for the war effort, now aimed at creating luxury cars for a new world. And all of this, it leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? Today, we see Mercedes-Benz as the absolute pinnacle of luxury and engineering. And that story starts with the genius and grit of Carl and Bertha Benz. But we can't ignore the other part of the story, the moral compromise, the dark past. So I guess the question for you is, when you see that iconic three-pointed star now, what does it really mean?